there's a product called ReviveAll, and that deals with the the emotional trauma component to a great degree. That was the first combination essence that I produced, and the flower, one of the great flowers in there is called blue-eyed grass. And so on page 229 of that book begins a discussion of ReviveAll that has 6 flowers in it, and the one that we're looking at first is blue-eyed grass, which gets rid of our reaction from having stored memories of emotional trauma or abuse. So the test phrase is, I am free from the effects of emotional abuse. We can test that. If the person stays strong, I am free from that. In fact, neurologically, neuromuscularly, we see that's true. And if they are not, then that's a flower that can shift it. We administer it instantaneously, and this is where the central section, part 2 of the book, talks about how can something change so quickly. You administer the drops, you retest, and immediately, when they weren't free from hidden emotional trauma and stress, after they experience the drops being placed on their tongue or drinking it in water, when you retest it, then nearly instantaneously, they become free from emotional trauma or stress. In normal concepts of stress control or stress management, that's impossible. That just doesn't make sense. But after 14 years of watching this and having hundreds of other health professionals corroborate it, it's happening. So that's the reason I wrote the book. How on earth could it be happening? And that's what made me explore the quantum science and quantum physics and produce many different theories of how on earth that can be happening, and using some world-class scientists to help me understand this and presenting original research and data that's never been published before. So definitely recommend you get this. For further details, get the book, The Floral Hand of God, Secret Healing Codes of Flowers Revealed. So for looking at the product called ReviveAll, which has 6 flowers, if you said I'm free from the effects of emotional trauma or abuse, and that was not true, in other words, you are suffering the effects of emotional trauma or abuse. Let's say, for example, a child that heard his mother and father arguing and screaming at each other day in and day out for several years of his life, that could produce an extraordinarily profound stress response of trauma. And that memory is embedded in the unconscious mind. So, and if you administer the drops, it takes it away. It's no longer there when you retest. That is a core cause of anxiety or stress that's been reduced. Then there are, I'm going to mention 3 other flowers. There are 6, but I'm going to mention 3 other flowers that are extraordinary. The first flower that I extracted from the high Andes in the early part of the early 2000s was a flower called Maquilina. Maquilina grows at about 15,000 feet. This particular flower, which is unique, which I point out in the book, is that it's not only the flower that I'm collecting, but it's where the flower comes from, the extraordinary environment of where the flower comes from. And Dr. William Tiller, when I explained this to him, the importance of the region, he then came up with a brilliant insight about, and Dr. Tiller's a world-renowned physicist, he came up with a brilliant insight that one of the reasons that the location of the flower is important is because of the piezoelectric nature of the crystalline substrate in the soil where the flower is growing. And it's described in the book, and it's too complicated to go into here. But these unusual environments that I'm guided to go to, produce a flower that has a unique capacity in that specific region and environment to download, receive instructional information that then can be transferred to the body. And that is described in this part 2, the science section of the book. This is part 3 of the book, which deals with the individual characteristics of the flower. So Maquilina has these amazing phrases. The belief would be, regardless of my efforts, I cannot influence the outcome. So when that is tested, the person tests true, coherent, they believe that. What would be the stress effects of unconsciously believing that no matter what you do, it won't make any difference. Regardless of my efforts, I cannot influence the outcome. And the second variation of that phrase is, no matter what action I take, I will be defeated. So, many people look at those phrases, and when you ask them to say the phrase, before they even say it, their response is, for testing purposes, when I'm in the office and I'm doing the neuromuscular testing with the verbal, we call semantic screening, before they say the statement, they look straight up at me and they say, I don't believe that. And I look back at them and I say, oh, I know you don't believe that, consciously. But what we're looking for is it in your unconscious mind? I.e., is it a deep unconscious stressor leading to anxiety? So I had one of my favorite stories on this, of the person that didn't believe that, or you wouldn't think would believe it. Actually, this particular fellow that I tested didn't say that. I had him, when I did the screening, and the book describes a process that's called holographic scanning that I teach practitioners to help rapidly do a pre-assessment of the likely floral frequencies that are needed, and then we go ahead and do the secondary part of the neuromuscular testing. So in that preliminary screening, it came up that this guy probably needed this floral life essence combination essence called ReviveAll, but it made no sense to me, because he needed that, and he needed this flower specifically, the flower called Makilina, the frequencies from the flower called Makilina, which says, regardless of my efforts, I cannot influence the outcome. The reason that made no sense to me was because the guy's an extremely successful businessman, CEO, owner of a number of very large commercial properties, malls, shopping areas, so, and his accumulated wealth and very prosperous and highly respected. So, and he teaches, by the way, he teaches classes in mind-body transformation. So the concept that he's ineffective makes no sense. And yet it came up at my screening. So I had him make the statement, regardless of my efforts, I cannot influence the outcome. He tested completely strong, coherent, meaning at the unconscious level, he believed it. And he was lying there on the table, and I was looking at him, he was looking at me, and I felt a little deferential. Like, well, this guy's a prominent person, and I'm not trying to insult him, but, well, that does, and I looked at him and I said, that doesn't make sense. So I'll never forget what happened after that. He looked up at me from the table and he said, but you don't know how much energy I have to expend to overcome that belief. I just got chills. Oh, wow. So he knew that he actually did have that in the unconscious mind. When I told him what I had found, he didn't resist that idea. He said, all right, well, I'm successful, but you don't know how much energy. So we administer that substance, recheck it in 4 weeks, and have him repeat the same phrase with the same sort of testing. And then he says, no matter what action I take, I will be defeated. And what was previously strong will weaken, meaning not true. So it's no longer true. And then 2 months later, 6 months later, or a year later, I frequently do this with my patients. I have records that show what we've given, and it's no longer true. So I make the statement, it is removed. We're not dealing with controlling anxiety and stressors. We're talking about checking to see that they're removed. Breakthrough. So another one is wild iris. And the test phrase for wild iris is, I am disconnected from the source of all life, and I am essentially unlovable. Those two phrases. And there's a very personal story about that. I was married and then I separated, and I was living on a beautiful forest, in the forest and the farm where I'm speaking to you today from this place. And it's an extraordinary still place in nature. And I tell people, you can hear the voice of God, of Creator, whatever you want to call it, it's really easy to hear that here, because it's completely still. But if you are spending long times in solitude here, it can become lonely. That's not anymore for me, because I've made some changes in that whole reaction or interaction with this beautiful space. But at that time, this was in about early 2000s, I was feeling very, very alone. And to the point of just calling out into nature, I gotta have some relief. And I have this, which is described in the book, I have a wonderful connection with nature, which so kindly comes to support and answer the needs, either my own, or when I see these terrible needs in patients, somehow when I voice that, which is described in the book, somehow there seems to be an answer that comes. So really quite quickly after a few days of feeling in this abject, very difficult position of feeling totally alone, I received the guidance to just walk up a path into the forest that I hadn't gone on for a while. And I found a flower that I knew was here, because I could see it, I could see the green part of the leaves, but I had never in several years seen it in bloom. So right when I was in this terrible state of need, there was the iris, the wild iris, blooming in the most beautiful, perfect state, just had opened and was fully open and vibrant. And when I looked at that flower, I realized that I had been guided there so that I could make the extract, which I did. But I didn't know what it would do. I just knew that I needed to make that extract. And when I took it to the clinic, very quickly, I was able to find that it was for that. It was to get rid of those terrible, unconscious beliefs, which are, repeat again, I'm disconnected from the source of all life, and I am essentially unlovable. So, if you believed that that was true at the unconscious level, what would it do in terms of being a huge stressor and potentially leading to all kinds of unconscious anxiety? If somebody believes that they're unlovable, that is a very unsettling belief. And when it goes away, it could be life-changing. All right? So, another flower, it grows across the house, across from where my house is on this property, 200 yards from where I'm sitting now, straight across an opening, a beautiful tulip poplar tree. And the tulip poplar tree has the belief, the statement, which we use this in the screening, my self-esteem is strong and balanced. So if the person fails that test, it means their self-esteem is not strong and balanced. You administer the drops, and just a second or two later, retest it, and they become absolutely strong. My self-esteem is strong and balanced. They previously weakened, you put in the drops, and they strengthen, meaning true. The book is written, and the Central Science section that took me 3 years to put together is written to explain how on earth could that happen? How could somebody not have self-esteem that was strong and balanced, put in frequencies, quantum frequencies from this particular flower, and all of a sudden have strong self-esteem? And I've watched this for years, and it's almost fail-proof. It's just nearly effective on everyone that needs it. So I consider that absolutely an extraordinary thing, a breakthrough discovery, and something that everybody needs to know about. So ReviveAll, and then there's 2 more flowers, but you can read those in that book, The Floral Hand of God, Secret Healing Codes of Flowers Revealed.